All right, in our last 5-6 minutes here, I called for questions on Twitter, and I don't want to ignore them. We got about a dozen. We'll get to as many as we can, but let's go, reasonably rapid fire anyway, and not 2-word answers, but any quick thoughts that any of the three or all three of us have, we can mix them in. I think this one will be fairly quick. Brian, the director, says, do you think Ainge gets more help for the bench? I'd rather have Isaiah Thomas over half the guys we have now. Edwards turned out to be a bust. 2 quick thoughts on that. One, doesn't look good for Edwards right now. There's no doubt about that. I think it's a little premature to call him a bust, but it certainly doesn't look like he's anywhere close to contributing at an NBA level. That's for sure. He needs more minor league seasoning, and obviously the future of the G League in this pandemic situation is unclear. As far as IT, I get it, but there's a reason the guy doesn't have a job.
Yeah, you hope that someone gets hurt and he gets a shot somewhere this year. But to be honest, it's a long list of free agents that you'd think would get a shot this year that are still unsigned. So it's tough. And they're certainly given once the depth chart at point guard here is very, very deep. So there's clearly not a spot for him on this roster at this point.
Yeah, it's a hard no to Isaiah Thomas, love him to death. And to just address the depth thing, I'm going to back up Ryan Bernardoni for a second. That TPE's got to get used this year because
100%.
Yeah, you got to use it. It'd be a failure to wait till next season to use it. Got to use it this year. Somebody to help out, score at the bench level. That's such a huge priority for them.
Well, from Rick, Horford return via the TPE. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say he's in OKC and they've absorbed that bad contract. But building on that, fellas, let's quickly on the TPE trade player exception, which is massive, nearly $30 million, as people know. And, you can't combine these things. So if you want to look up what players would even be mathematically available to the Celtics, look at anyone who earns less than $28.5 million, basically. Do you think this thing gets used before the trade deadline? Because we know it's not happening imminently. Do you think it gets used before the trade deadline? Do you think we're looking at next free agent or next offseason? Or do you think Danny actually doesn't use this thing?
They're 100% using it. You don't give up 2 second-round picks to get a trade exception and not use it. That would just be lunacy. When they use it, we'll see. I agree that this year, if you're serious about making a run, being competitive in the playoffs this year, and maybe that changes if Kemba's knee is not right and he's out for the year or something like that eventually. But if he's back, then you're using it. You're using the first 2 months to evaluate what you have on this roster, and then you see what teams fall out of it, and then you add a player, you add 2 players with it.
Yeah, I like Houston. I like Houston just because when they trade Harden, it's going to be a for sale sign there. And I keep coming back to Eric Gordon. And I know he's injury prone, but that's somebody that they could use off the bench for some firepower. You have to tell Eric Gordon, hey, by the way, you're coming off the bench. And he's done that a lot in his career for Houston, but they're going to need some firepower. I think Eric Gordon gives it to him. He can be okay defensively. Maybe the ball gets a little too stagnant when it gets in his hands, but it's something they can desperately use right there.
You've written extensively about the TPE and options available to the Celtics. Rob, who in your realistic wish list, I think it's important to frame it that way, so you couldn't say Giannis, who in your realistic wish list, who's number 1 for the Celtics for you?
I think best case scenario for the Celtics this year is Orlando starts blowing it up if they fall out of the East race early and Aaron Gordon comes available. I think that's the price is, he only makes, I think, $18-19 million a year. He's under contract through next season. That's a guy who could be in your closing 5 as a stretch 5. So it fills in from that standpoint, fills in from a defensive versatility standpoint. And yeah, so it comes to price point. I think the hope from a Celtics standpoint is that some of these, smaller market teams that, everyone thinks they're in it right now, that's going to change in February and March. And then at that point, if you're the Celtics, you have to hope that teams are looking to dump money in the middle, like ownerships are looking to cut payroll. And so maybe the asking price on a guy like Gordon comes down a little bit than what it was at this point in the offseason, since they clearly, that core, something has to change with that core there because that's been in place for a while and they have done nothing with it.
Celtics Live says, will there come a point if this core doesn't mesh this season, would they be open to trading away parts of it for a bigger piece? Tatum obviously being untouchable. I don't think we really need to spend time on this because we kind of already did. These guys believe that Jaylen Brown is more available than I do. When you start talking about a James Harden, for instance.
Well, yeah, for Harden. Yeah, I mean, it's
but that's the kind of bigger piece that I think this person's alluding to.
Yeah, and that's really about it, though. I'm not trading Jaylen Brown unless I'm getting a bona fide superstar back. And Harden's the only guy that kind of fits that description right now. But we'll see, because, watch Minnesota. I don't know what. It's just a disaster out in Minnesota, probably. Watch out there. Watch some teams that have high-level players and can, if they go south in a hurry, they can shake some of that tree and maybe land somebody. But, unless it's somebody really significant, I'm not trading Jaylen Brown for anybody.
From Brian, and I'll give this to Brian, predict the Celtics' most used rotation when everyone is healthy. So for the 6 games this year, that'll happen. Who do you like?
I mean, yeah, you got, I think Kemba, Smart, Brown, Tatum, Thompson are your starters. And then coming off the bench, you got Tice, you got Teague, you got Grant Williams. And then I think you got a wild card player X, whether that's Pritchard or Nesmith at that point in the year. Remains to be seen. And then, to be honest, it's probably going to be traded player X. Because I think that's the veteran guy that comes in with the traded player exception at some point to fill in some of that gap at the bench.
So that's a best case scenario. Here's kind of a worst from Kevin. Who is your crunch time lineup for the Celtics going into the first week of games?
Smart, Brown, Tatum. That's easy. Whoever's got it going better on a certain night, Tice or Thompson, I think is your 4th. And then the 5th guys, I think we just spin a wheel, because I think that's going to be your answer on any given night. It's going to who's playing well, who are you playing, what are the matchups?
I got one. I got your normal, Brown and Tatum, no question. I'm going to throw Tristan Thompson in there if he's healthy. And I got 2 wild cards. I got 2 wild cards for you. Okay. I would play Grant Williams, and pinning the score, I would play Jeff Teague, because you need offense. And I love Smart to death, but sometimes he just shoots too much, and I need a guy that's going to get the ball to where it needs to go. And Jeff Teague does that pretty well so far. So worst case scenario, I guess, is Teague, Brown, Tatum, Grant, and Tristan. But I think just as a ending note on that, just play Grant Williams more. He does a lot of good stuff.
But fellas, let's not count out from Jay. What blackmail does Shemi Ojale have on Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens?
They keep remembering this. That's it. That's a good time.
I understand the Ojale question. Again, he wouldn't have been on this roster probably if Hayward came back. Just straight up. At the same time,
he's already said that,
right? And he's exactly. So that's it is what it is. Ojale would be fine as if you're 12th, 13th, 14th man, just to use as a specialist. The problem is when you ask him to do more than that, and that's obviously has been the Celtics the last few years. And again, probably the first couple months of this season. So we'll see. He'll get his chances, but once he gets back to just a specialist role, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. And that's if you're going to have him at the end of the bench.
Darth says, is anybody else tired of Ainge drafting scrappy, e.g. undersized guys who can't shoot? Darth, that was the whole point of this draft. They drafted guys who historically can shoot.
Yeah, you literally got 2 of the best shooters in the draft. So that's again, we'll see if it translates to the NBA, but they certainly help themselves, or should try to help themselves on that front.
Carson was supposed to shoot. I'll just leave it at that.